Was recently able to talk with journalist and writer for The New Yorker and New Republic, among numerous other publications, and contributing editor to The Atlantic Monthly, Graeme Wood, on his recent trip to Burma. Mr. Wood, thank you so much for joining me on the program.
My pleasure.
Would you mind describing for me your recent trip to Burma? In what capacity did you travel there, and what was your experience like?
I went to Burma as a journalist. I write for the New Republic magazine, and I was there on a grant from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum to find out the situation of the Rohingya on a trip of just a couple weeks.
I read in your article for the New Republic that you traveled to internally displaced persons camps for the Rohingya and the Arakanese. How did the camps differ in your impression?
Well, the main difference between the two camps was that the Arakanese camps were not prisons. They were a place where people could come and go, and in fact did. They'd go to work, and then they'd return to what really appeared to be a big row of longhouses. And it was considerably more free than you'd find if you went to the Rohingya side of the line.
I know that you also traveled to Burma back in 1998. How has the country changed since then?
The changes in the country are enormous. I was in Burma in 1998 and saw a very, very closed society, one that was certainly not ready to accept huge infusions of Western capital in particular. But even the connections with other parts of Southeast Asia and Asia more generally were quite limited technologically, and just in many ways in the spirit of the people. It was very difficult to have really strong connections between Burmese and the outside world then. Now, if you go back, the country is really roaring economically, and a lot of those connections are quite robust. So you could find ATMs coughing up money. You find evidence of business connections, and generally it's a country that's moved forward very fast economically.
So as Myanmar is being touted as a kind of U.S. diplomatic success story due to democratic reforms, you're saying the economic changes are more noticeable?
Certainly what's most visible is economic reform, and I wouldn't want to minimize the importance of that. Having those connections with the outside world is a very important aspect of reforming the country in subtler ways too. As for the political reform, obviously it has a long way to go, and to tout it as a success is at best simplistic. Clearly, what we have in the way of democracy in Burma doesn't resemble democracy as we'd apply the term in almost any other country. So quite a long way to go, but I do hope that it proceeds in deeper ways than just sham election.
So, Graeme, I wanted to ask you, in your article you mentioned that an expatriate you spoke with said that the Myanmar government is using the Rohingya issue to politically outmaneuver Aung San Suu Kyi. What's your take on that comment?
I think it meant a lot of things. I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi's position right now as the godmother of democratic movement in Burma is really coming under assault by the kind of real political kind of requirements that she's meeting, and the fact that the Rohingya issue is one that really a very large majority of Burmese people they're willing to get behind the subjugation and in some cases even the expulsion of the Rohingya. So asking her to opine on that issue means really forcing her either to say something that is morally reprehensible or to say something that's politically unpalatable. It's a way for her to be put in a position of either losing friends abroad or losing them domestically. And it's a very difficult position to be in.
I was surprised by your observation of, maybe intrinsic is too strong a word, but deep-seated racism you wrote about. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't really call it intrinsic. Of course, these things all have long historical roots, not to justify them, but to say that these things, they don't come out of nowhere and they're not immutable. That said, they seem to be very, very deep. It was not difficult at all to find people whose opinions of the Rohingya were they were motivated by deep racial animus and hatred. And you didn't have to go to ideologues or to crazy people to find these things, although those people were abundant as well. If you ask an average person in the street about the Rohingya, the opinion you're going to get is not going to be a nice one.
Would you say this racism was expressed on both sides of the fence, so to speak?
I certainly, well, no. It would be wrong to equate the opinions of each side, but there were certainly enormous amounts of distrust on the parts of Rohingya, of their former Buddhist neighbors, and there's been violence in both directions, of course. That said, overwhelmingly, the Rohingya have been the victims in this case. So I wouldn't want to suggest that the hatred that I've heard from them would be equated to the more general hatred of the majority toward the Rohingya.
Mr. Wood, thank you so much again for speaking with me today.
Thanks for talking with me.
Once again, that was journalist Graeme Wood speaking with me after his trip to Burma. You can read his article titled A Countryside of Concentration Camps on the New Republic website.